I wanted to create a safe space to have uncomfortable yet transformative conversations that move people, amplifying the voices of those who are underrepresented and who inspire positive change. I'm Toni Williams, and this is Brooklyn Savvy. Brooklyn and beyond, I am so excited because I am sitting next to Malik Yoba. Also, what is it? You are Detective Julius Clarence on New York Undercover. So I'm just thrilled. I am thrilled to have you at the 20th season for Brooklyn Savvy. I mean, I'm just feeling your energy, and I'm liking what I'm feeling. Yes, I am. So I've got some questions. We do a this or that, and This is all about preferences. So what do you prefer, acting or singing?
I don't prefer one over the other. I love them both.
Equally then?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. East Coast, West Coast?
It depends. Mm-hmm. But, you know, I live in Brooklyn.
So your heart is in Brooklyn?
Absolutely.
All right. So that's the East Coast. And entertainment or business?
Well, the business of entertainment.
Ooh. So we're going to have to talk after. But anyway, thank you so much for that. Now, we're going to talk about your three passions: film, youth, and real estate. But I want to start by asking you why you like to do hard things, because acting is hard. It's very difficult. You can fly without a net. Real estate is hard. It's very difficult. You're flying without a net. What is it in you that wants to do the hard stuff?
I think it's growing up in an abusive household.
Really? Let's unpack that
That's
a little
part
bit.
of it.
What do you mean?
I really, you know, for a long time, I used to think that like working in like being in Hollywood is an abusive relationship.
Yes, it is. A lot of rejection.
But I never really look at it as rejection. But I because at the end of the day, what's for you won't go past you.
Hey,
so
what's for you can't be for you.
That's right.
Right.
So it's not really rejection. It just means that's not your time. But I think that you know, recently Taraji's been talking a lot about the realities of what it means, right?
Right. And money and all of that.
Not just the money, but what happens when you achieve a certain level of success. It's still like Groundhog Day, right? But you keep going back for more. Or even when you start, right? You pursue something where you have probably a 99.9% chance that it ain't gonna work, but you do it anyway. Right? And so even if the whole world is saying, don't do it, it's too hard, you still do it. And I think that in abusive relationships, that's what people do, right? They keep going back for more punishment. I say that kind of facetiously.
Certainly, because that's going into codependency. Yes.
I mean, so we won't go that far down the road. But I think that there's something about the resilience that it takes, the intestinal fortitude to wake up every day and go for something that makes you feel uncomfortable. And so I don't like to do anything that is too easy.
Right.
So whether it's real estate, just living in America, living in the world, I think is a challenge. But I think the pursuit in these spaces is incredibly challenging, but it's also very rewarding.
Right, but it takes a while for some, and some it eludes. I'm talking basically about the acting piece. Because I had an acting bug too, but what I decided was I would transmute that into this TV show so that I could work it out, because I used to love acting.
Why'd you stop?
Because I wanted to eat, and I did not want to do what it took in some instances as I saw it.
That doesn't mean you can't act.
No, and I'm doing that right now in many respects. Right. You know, but I didn't want to play the game. It's just that simple. I was not the one for that.
Yeah, me either.
And I also didn't like going hungry, and I also knew I had a vast skill set. You know, I wasn't the kind of person that said, there's got to be this or else. I could never be that person, because there's a whole lot of other things that I wanted to be able to do. But let's talk about this whole real estate piece and the importance of home ownership for Black people, and whether that's even attainable right now. I'm concerned when I look at Brooklyn and I see housing prices, 1, 2, 3, 4 million.
Right.
Where do we go in that kind of a climate when it comes to real estate?
So the issue around affordability is about lack of stock, right? Like the reality is in America, we need about 7 million units of housing, right? And so when there's more supply, right, that helps with the demand. And so because there's a lack of supply, then, you know, prices are gonna skew up and up and up, right? At the rate that they are. So that's one of the reasons why I got into development. So we live in this community, we just see a building go up and don't realize that that's actually the second generation of a family that's already transformed Brooklyn. Part of the passion around real estate is not just about home ownership, but it's about education, right? Because the first real estate we own is in our minds. And so
that's interesting. Unpack that just a little bit for my viewers, right?
The first place that you have to invest is in your education.
Exactly,
right?
exactly.
And so
and your thoughts.
if you understand the landscape and how things work, then it's easier to get involved, right? And so for me, it's about how do we make sure that as many people that look like us as possible have this information. So as a for instance, right? So Yoba Development just ran the first real estate development program for high school students in New York City.
Is that the one at the Navy area?
At the Brooklyn Steam Center, right? So there's this little kid, Dante Brathwaite, 18 years old, wanted to graduate, wanted to become a developer. He was part of my program.
Right.
The program we started in March of 2023. He graduated in June, got him a paid internship with Hines Development Corporation. He was just hired by the company full-time. He's joined the union. He's now working in facilities management, and they'll pay for him to go to college.
Oh, fantastic.
That's one kid. So just by investing in the education of 2 young people in this city, transform their lives. So if you have a commitment to sharing information, particularly with people who have some hustle about them, they're going to turn that information into action. They're going to do something about it. So yes, it's going to be challenges. That's inherent in anything we do. But the idea that, you know, we shouldn't, not that you said that,
right. No,
but
no,
I
no,
think that the
right.
commitment to education, for me anyway, and as a company, has to be strong. On top of the fact that the education itself is monetizable.
Right.
So we don't just do this for free,
right?
You can turn it into programming, right? To run these programs with DOE, that's contracts with the city. So at the end of the day, it's important that I think education is you know, embedded into the process.
I always saw real estate, though, as being one of those careers. It's a sales career. It can be kind of iffy, you know, because you may not have base pay. You're kind of out there flying without a net.
The ecosystem, there's many entry points. So for a lot of people, it's maybe becoming a realtor.
And
but
like you
there's
said,
other ways to get into the business.
Right, busting that bubble. You talked about the bubble that we can sometimes live in as African American.
Most people don't think about it in its totality. They think about like, you know, you walk by a construction site, oh yeah, I know a construction worker.
And you talked about how you would peek through those construction
gates. I still do that.
Right?
Since I was a little kid.
I love your appreciation for the construction fields. I mean, my husband's a plumber. And so often I'll say it, folks will look down on those jobs, and they really shouldn't. You know,
on the trades?
Yeah, they look down. How do you address that? Because there's money in that. You can support a family on that. You can do all of that.
Really well.
You can be a general contractor. You can do all kinds of things.
You can do really well. HVAC. You know, I mean, all of those careers. The electricians. You know, dudes can make I won't say 7 figures, but you can make good $250,000 a year doing HVAC work on a construction site, as an example, or welding. You know, same thing. You can do 6 figures easily doing welding, and I think part of that is the trades were taken out of schools, right?
Right.
And so, and so there's, in fact, if you look at most construction sites across America, you see immigrants working those sites. Old black
West
dudes
Indians.
anymore. No, more than anything, you
and-
see
and-
Latinos,
right.
particularly on the non-union sites,
Right.
all across America, because a lot of people don't want to do that work. Same thing with like car mechanics, right? The auto industry is really suffering because there's not enough people to fill those jobs. So part of what we're doing on the education side, in fact, one of the grants my nonprofit is going after right now is a grant called Youth Build by the Department of Labor for that reason, to introduce more young people 16 and 24 to the construction trades.
That's fantastic. And I would say too, to make sure, and I know that you are a very aware person, that women are included in that. They're
1000%.
females. You know, that's so important.
Yeah.
Want to talk about, you're an actor, and how do you intersect that acting, or is there an intersection? What did acting do to help you move in this realm in real estate, or did it do anything? Was there any?
Well, there's definitely a connection. There's definitely intersectionality. So, I mean, number one, just growing up in the South Bronx and Harlem when it was rubble, these were my dreams as a kid. I didn't know it was called development. I just see the empty lots and say, I want to put a building there. Or, you know, in one case, I actually tried to build a BMX track. I used to race bikes, and so I actually tried to do my first development deal in Central Park. When I was 17, I met with the Parks Department to build a BMX track. And so it was this Trini guy who my mother knew. He indulged me and met with me, and he's just, you know, getting a kick out of this kid saying, I need 4 acres and this is how much money I need, and I had all my facts and figures, but that never happened. But for me,
so
it was—
you've always been kind of a businessman, I'm hearing.
Well, we were raised that way.
Okay.
My father always said, build your own generator so when they turn off the power, you still have lights.
Oh, go
so,
Dad. That's
so
very good.
we always, I had a paper out at 8 years old to 16 in Harlem.
Industrious.
In Harlem.
Right, okay.
In the 80s,
right.
70s. But the point is that I always thought about development. I always thought about building. My mother loved architecture. She always had like design magazines in the house, so there was always this appreciation of the aesthetics of design. But it was actually on the set of New York Undercover that I met my first real estate developer. I had a theater company and producing plays, like those plays that you show up at the Beacon.
Okay, right.
With folks called the Chitlin Circuit.
Yes, Chitlin
We're making
Circuit,
millions
yes.
of dollars servicing the black community with plays. But the point is, I was looking for raising money for my company, and I was dating this woman who was a developer out of DC, and she said, oh, you should talk to this guy, Dan Bythewood in New York. And I was like, oh, I know that dude from New York Undercover. So Dan is the first person to give me a seat at the table to learn about real estate development. And so I told him, you know, we're talking about raising money for this theater thing. And then I said, you know, I always wanted to do what you do. He's like, word, come down to Baltimore. So that was my first entree, and that was probably—
in the 90s, you said, 1996?
No, development was 2008.
Okay.
I got involved. But I bought my first property in like 96.
Right.
But so Dan Bythewood is the person that sat me down, brought me to Baltimore. My first meeting was a meeting with the city, like land use, guy who ran land use, and meeting with council people. So I began to learn the political side of things, and then learned about the architectural side and engineering and the finance, all that stuff. Most people don't really understand how many opportunities are in both of these spaces. And being in both spaces, I said, I want to bring real estate, filmmaking, and young people together. And that's how that became the focus of Yoba Development. You know, 3 of my passions for education, for, you know, real estate, but how do we use media to tell these stories to accelerate the learning? I want to figure out a way to get more black and brown kids into the space. I said, I'm going to shoot a documentary, and that began this.
Now, you're still working on that documentary, though.
No, I shot it.
I thought it was going to be a series, no?
Well, it is a series.
All right.
But I made it specifically for high schools, colleges, and community. So for the last 2 years, I've probably been to almost 50 cities. It's been screened for about 100,000 people. It's been streamed for about 1.5 million people. But that series drives a lot of my real estate activity internationally now. So like,
but I'm also hearing a lot about your star power being able to make these things happen. Meaning, how does someone that doesn't have what you have, the network that you clearly have, the connections, the people that have money, how do you still make those real estate, that kind of dream happen?
So part of the reason why I've been so passionate about telling these stories is because there are so many incredible people that look like you and me that started from nothing. Like, most of us did not grow up with a father or grandfather or grandmother or mother that was a developer.
Right.
It's very rare that you see 2 and 3 generations. There's a few, but very, very rare. So most people of color that are even in the space, they're the first generation. But there are incredible people all over this country and around this world that are doing things in this space. And so when I'm traveling around and I see these people, I'm like, who's telling your story? I'm gonna tell your story. And so that's where that started, is that I'm seeing all of these folks that don't have star power, that are not celebrities, that are killing the game, but no one knows who they are. And so how do I use who I am and whatever modicum of celebrity or success that I have to shine a light on other people? That's really been the game.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
But I think about information and education, which is clearly important, but then there's still that access to capital issue.
Yep.
How does one confront that?
Head on. It's not that it's not there. Like, if you look at who we are as a community, right? What's that number that folks like to throw around in terms of black consumerism? It's in the trillions.
Right.
So we have capital. Where do we spend it? Where do we spend it? And so that's why the education is important.
Right.
So when you start talking to your community and say, hold on, instead of all of us buying these sneakers and these iPhones and all these cars, whatever, how do we work together to put our dollars together to invest? So toward that end, one of the things that we have coming live this year, myself and some other partners, is a equity crowdfunding platform called Invest Tank. So you might have a property, right? Or you might see a property that you want to acquire, but you may not have all the capital. Well, how do you put together a team that can go after that collectively? And those are some of the things that we have to start thinking about.
And we have to really understand it, because I know in my past life, I worked at Con Edison. I was director of public affairs at that point, and we had a Renaissance housing program for years.
Right.
And I learned, I didn't know anything about development, could have cared. What my attorney who was on my team would talk about is these developers really have to have a stomach for this, because they can lose their shirts in
1000%.
a minute. It's extremely risky.
Right.
And what we would do is partner nonprofits with banks and helping to get the construction financing and all of that. But it's the losing the shirt piece that's kind of scary, and a lot of folks
do you see what you're doing?
That. Oh, am I talking it down? I'm not
being
positive?
I'm just asking you. Are you aware of how you're speaking about this?
I'm speaking about this through the lens of I did it.
Right.
But I'm concerned about if others can.
Right.
That's kind of how I'm speaking about it.
But we live in an abundant universe.
Okay, now, yes.
So,
and if I can do it, who can? You're right.
So if we lead with, it's too hard, I can't, we don't have. It's not going to work. It's not that it's not going to work, because you'll be surprised all day long with things that will happen in spite of yourself. But I think it's important. That's why the first real estate we own is in our minds. So if you make an investment and a commitment, like, I love the fact that I inserted myself into a business that I did not go to school for. I don't come from a family that did it, but it's a determination to say, I'm going to do this. I didn't say I want to do it. I'm going to do this.
I got you. And my story is better. Keep going, though. I don't want to
interrupt. Your story's amazing.
No, I got to go.
Because you have 3 properties.
Exactly, and I got them in that way.
And your girlfriend got a property.
Exactly.
And you said, "Can I get it?" You said you asked God.
I asked God.
I need a miracle. And what happened?
He gave it to me in 3 weeks, because it was really interesting, because one of my girlfriends was living in a place in Park Slope, and the landlord said, how much do you want to pay for it? He was 80, he wanted to get rid of it. I said, God, why don't you do that for me? And do you know he did that for me 3 weeks later?
Yeah.
And the piece of property we have now is worth 10 times more than we paid for it. And the other place I got in an auction, and I was praying. No, it happens.
Yeah.
But I just feel the numbers were a little smaller, but then they were big. Yeah, I don't know.
You're saying a lot of stuff right now.
I know. The truth is, Brooklyn, you can do this. It just takes faith. I believe in that. And that's why when you talk about the universe and having that real estate, it starts up there with the I can do, just what you said, and to believe and to lean into it. And don't see it as a joke. It's the way things happen.
And be insistent.
Right. It's all about 1000%. Manifestation. It's all about manifestation. Let's talk about flipping the hood, because right now, gentrification, is always an issue.
As I mentioned, from an education perspective, our approach is high schools, colleges, and community. So we started with the pilot program this past year. High school students have a partnership with Pratt, partnering with different HBCUs like FAMU, a couple others, and we'll continue to build out the network on education through that in that way. On the community side, it's important to bring these opportunities to the community. So from the ground up, Flipping the Hood is an activation that Yoba Development does in coordination with my foundation, which is Yoba Development Foundation. And it's about bringing people into spaces so that we can learn together. So bringing professionals across the real estate ecosystem, but we've also had people in technology, people in federal contracting, all kinds of other entrepreneurs, but creating space, a safe space where we could learn together. And the approach is mental, emotional, physical, financial, and spiritual.
I was getting ready to ask you about your spiritual practice, but keep going.
So because it's one thing to just say, hey, come to this space and get this information. But if people are not mentally and emotionally and spiritually grounded, then they're gonna miss a lot. And so you gotta tend to that soil as well and make sure that you prime the folks. So
how do you do that?
So we began
make that soil
both
nice
days
and fertile,
with
not
meditation.
hard.
We start with meditation.
Ooh, okay.
So, folks aren't used to going to a business conference, and it's not a conference, we call it an activation, because the idea is that once you activate, then you have to keep it moving, right? Conferences or events come and go. But the idea that we're going to take a holistic approach to the person, back to the first real estate you own is in your mind. Right? And when you go even further than that, we used to be the real estate. Right? That really drove the economy in this country. So when we're talking about a traumatized people that live in communities that others are gentrifying, that we feel displaced, that we might be asset rich, cash poor, then how do we get our minds right? Right? So that we can be in a place to receive this information. And so we did it at the Brooklyn Navy Yard. We had about 1,000 people over 2 days. But those 2 days generated about $50 million of business activity, meaning people who met, formed partnerships, made investments. Some of the young people that were there got additional scholarships.
This is so powerful what you've created.
I'm just being obedient.
But I want to dig in. What is your spiritual practice?
Being obedient to the calling. So
now, obedient.
Yes, ma'am.
What does that mean to you?
So a lot of times, as an artist, art will imitate life.
Right. And it's also good therapy sometimes with the acting, I thought. I found it was.
Yes.
But not to interrupt you, because I can do that,
It can be. It can. But in this particular case, I was really struck by the divine nature of this information, this script coming my way, where I'm literally playing myself.
So synchronicity.
Right. And so while I was shooting that show, I hear real estate filmmaking young people. And I didn't know what that was going to be. I just knew that I needed to find a way to bring these three things together. And as I said, I took that idea to my friend who's the developer. He said he'd fund it. So the first iteration was a doc series where I took 7 young people of color on this 6-week journey around New York City as I pursued my first development deal. So I was able to bring together real estate, filmmaking, young people in one iteration. That has led to incredible business opportunities, partnerships, the education stuff. So when I say obedience, for me, it was about following that seed, right? Like nurturing that. I was able to make significant strides with this company in all 3 verticals, from the real estate deal flow side, from the education side, to the media side. And it's just one of those things where I always say the work is working. So even though it's been, that was year 5, this is year 6 of the company, where you see the momentum pick up and the opportunities and the spaces. I don't get invited to, speak at, the state of Alabama Minority Procurement Conference as Malik Yoba, the actor. I get invited as CEO of Yoba Development. So that was one of the biggest things for me, is that it's moved from, yes, people know me from that thing, of the work that I do as an actor, but I'm invited as a real estate professional, and that's a significant learning. As an example, for me, this was so important for those theater kids, because I'm telling them, yes, pursue the arts. Yes, if you're passionate about directing or being a stage manager or writing, whatever it might be, but also understand this business thing so that you can have a solid foundation no matter what it is that you try to do. And you can understand how creativity can play a role in all of this, right? I pull up to these real estate conferences with a documentary about real estate. Like, who the hell would have? Right. And you saw it, the way I did it.
Right.
It's just not a bunch of talking heads.
No.
We're moving,
It's a
it's shot
story.
cinematically, it's the right type of music, you know, you feel emotion, whether it's the reggae music, whether it's hip or whatever it is, right? And that's why it's called the real estate mixtape. Even that's a story just by the name, right? Because when I edited it, I knew I didn't want it to be just a bunch of talking heads, right? I wanted it to move like I'm a DJ in a party. I'm gonna give you a little of this, a little of that, mix this up, come back to that, and you're gonna move, and it's gonna be emotional, it's gonna get you thinking about some stuff, right? So for me, when you ask, what do I prefer, one or the other, all of it.
I hear that because what I'm seeing is you're using every bit of yourself.
Right.
That's
the
deep.
obedience.
That's deep. You're using every ounce of your skill and experience to create this life.
When I go around this country, and I'm everywhere from Little Rock to Hilton Head to Augusta, Georgia, where we have a big development project going on, or wherever it might be, I've realized that dream. That now I'm that dude that, you know, has a certain level of celebrity that people will show up because it's Malik Yoba, but we really about this business and we're really about transforming these communities, right? And so you say, what is the goal or what's the big dream? I'm living the dream.
Right.
I'm literally living the dream every single day.
This has been a phenomenal conversation. I'm so inspired by everything that you shared. Anyway, thank you so much for all that you're imparting. Thank you for what you're doing for our people.
Thank you for having
our
me.
youth.
Thank you for what
so
you're
much.
doing. This is important.
Well, thank you so much, and we will see you next time on Brooklyn Savvy.